Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. So happy to have you all. Please let me know how the volume is. Hello, Scarf My Heart. Um, it's been a while, and I know we've been neglecting this for a while. So I thought, maybe we jump back in and see how our mecha lesbians are doing. So for those of you who don't know, this is the Warhammer 30,000 novel Titandeath, which I think is like book 52 or something in the Horus Heresy series. Basically, this is one of like the few books leading up directly before the traders reach the solar system. And by solar system, I mean literally the soul system, i.e., where Earth is. And so as a brief recap from what I remember, because it's been a while, we are following this legion of all women predisposed to lesbianism Titan mecha pilots who are all styled after hunters, and they have been deployed to this system called Beta Garmin slash I guess Theta Garmin. I don't know, man. To basically hold off the traders as long as they can. So because Titans are really big and powerful, you having a shit ton of them on Earth would be a bit problematic for the planet's welfare. And so Rogel Dorn decided to ship all of most of the Titans off planet to go fight over here, where they could actually be useful and not destroy Terra in the process. So we also know that the current head of our lesbian mecha Titan Legion is has a few days left to live, and her daughter is supposed to take over after her. And then her ex slam piece, her ex boy toy, if you will, was a part of the traders and is trying to go kill her for vengeance. Titans do seem to be very destructive to basically everything nearby. Correct. So one of the bad guy tech priests figured out how to basically do a mind control mind break implant on people, and he took over basically a small army and used them to try and ambush our ladies, but our ladies were too crafty, and so they suffered comparatively small casualties for what was a entirely unexpected ambush and everything. So we're gonna hop right in. I don't remember where I left off aside from this bookmark. And then I don't remember the voices I gave everyone. I'm sorry. I'll just do my best to reenact them as we go. So this is just a read along, so feel free to ask any questions or anything along the way. It's just supposed to be fun and silly. So without further ado, let me get a sip of my Wawa. Okay. Ataris moved in for the kill under the cover of the storm, targeting god engines being stripped of their shields. A chunk of annihilated orbital slammed down directly on one of the firebrands, smashing its void shields out and punching it flat into the metal. The impact wrinkled up the surrounding area as if it were ripples on water, and the maniple mates of the dead Titan were sent staggering. One fell, another was turned about. Obstructions around Volpa's position broke up their coherency, but the meteor fall did the same to Ataris. Electromagnetic interference from the storm cut into the infosphere as easily as the meteors speared into the dead section of the station. The defense turrets went into overdrive. There were far too many pieces of debris, ranging from metal fragments to whole modules. So many they blocked out the sun as they sped overhead. If I recall, Legio Volpa is our bad guy Titan Legion. That's the one that's led by the ex husbando. I think his mech specifically is Nuntio Dolores. And then so Legio Ataris are the good guy legion that's currently squaring up with them because our Imperial Huntresses, I think they're called Legio Solaria, something like that, are on another planet. They've timed their attacks poorly, Bavin sent. His thought patterns were breaking up. The wider connections between the Legio's engines were failing. No, thought Hairtech. They've timed this to perfection. Seventh Maniple, turn about! He yelled. Prepare to engage flanking force! Nuntio Dolores swung its left leg wide, turning its torso hard at the same time. And its right foot dug into metal as the impetus swiveled the giant war machine around. Hairtech's intuition was correct. Using the cover of the storm, 4 maniples of Legio Ataris had come upon them unawares. Hairtech suspected they dropped through the meteors. He almost respected them for that. Enemy incoming, 3rd quadrant. Already the outflankers were firing. Screaming his anger, Hairtech urged Nuntio Dolores into a run. The reactor burned hot with the effort of forcing the warlord's mass into action. Cumbersome at first, the Titan built up speed, its awkward jog turning into an unstoppable charge. Chunks of debris slammed in the orbital in a constant rain. Void shields flared with such frequency the battlescape was lost to streamers of energy. Tosin's blurted, terrified, mewling beeps, and Hairtech's MIU displays were crowded with swarms of dots. A veil of shining purple light skinned rippling bubbles that encased each Titan. Hundreds of thousands of minute displacement flares prickled every shield from the impact of microfragments. Weapons fire added to the effect, the void shields smearing plasma and laslight into glorious display. The other maniples were slow to respond. That nearest Hairtech's was occupied with the enemy to the front. Under fire from 2 sides, void shields collapsed in rapid succession, exposing the vulnerable, poorly armored rears of the great machines. The static-crazed sensorium input ceased altogether for a moment as the reactor of Death's Monument went critical, swamping the shields of its fellows and scooping out a shallow hemisphere from the skin of the orbital. A rush of expanding gaseous metal slammed into Nuntio Dolores. His outer shield collapsed and the war engine staggered. Sparks showered from systems blown by the violent overload. Servitors moaned from their cocoons of wires. Nuntio Dolores ran into the teeth of the enemy, its maniple brothers close behind. Ultimate Sanction took a series of withering hits to the front, blasting out its shields. Quick to exploit the collapse, 2 of the outflanking warlords hammered the Reaver Dust of Ages. Its armor held, but it peeled away from the assault. Its Princeps McLaren using the Vox in panic, shouting about loss of atmosphere. Durant brought Tenebris Vindicae close to Nuntio Dolores, so the warlords were shoulder to shoulder. Proximity alarms bleated both in the MIU infoscape and within the Cizella. Hairtech rebuked the lesser systems for their fear, and they fell silent. His Reavers and warlords fell back, cutting short their runs towards the outflanking force to provide covering fire. They followed Hairtech's preference, picking out the leading Ataris engine and lambasting it with everything they had. Its shields burst quickly, the armor followed. Hairtech had a fleeting glimpse of its name and history. A roll of honor stretching back 700 years was cut short, and the smoking remains of the Titan fell down in ridiculous, low-gravity slow motion. Engine kill! Engine kill! Engine! A spray of a laser shot lit up Hairtech's forward aspect, and the enemy loomed suddenly gigantic before him. His void slammed into one of the rival warlord bearing the nameplate Excellent across its chest. Violent emissions of energy enwrapped both machines as Hairtech forced his way through the fields pressed into one another until, with a blinding flash, they merged into one bulging, squirming spheroid. Tenebris Vindicae plodded past the embattled pair, seeking its own prey, as Hairtech made ready to kill. Brazen horns sang in his mind. Exultant swung about and stepped back, trying to bring its primary weapons to bear, as Hairtech raised the Ariok Power Claw and drove forwards hard. He roared with ecstasy as the fist contacted skidded free, and then grabbed, taking hold of the enemy Titan's volcano cannon, ignoring the many impacts rattling off his armor from Exultant's defensive guns. With a mighty wrench, Nuntio Dolores yanked the cannon free. Gas and fluids gushed out from severed feed lines. Sparks played around the stump of the arm. The enemy machine was not down yet. It took 2 steps back. Carapace and remaining arm weapons swiveled to come to bear on Nuntio Dolores. Heretic fought against his Titan's battle rage, to send it to the side as a spear of light a meter wide slammed into Nuntio Dolores' thighs. A scatter of false pain crawled across Heretic's own leg, so intense it threatened him with a manifestation of machinic stigmata. He bit hard against it, and some small, insignificant part of the blended man-machine tasted blood in its mouth. Victory was in his grasp. "Fire!" he ordered. Nothing happened. "Fire!" he ordered again. Still nothing happened. He felt the unity of mind and machine part fraying like cut rope. Nuntio Dolores was rebelling against him, pushing him out. It was raging, desperate to grapple with the machine that had wounded it. As a furious steed bucks its rider, Heretic was cast from the Titan's embrace. He came out gasping, a migraine splitting his brain with the force of an axe. It was all he could do not to rip out the neural shunt. "What's happening?" shouted the Maserati steersman. "All controls are down," shouted the Primus. The Exultant was drawing back for another shot, its cannons leveled. "Get us out of here!" shouted Heretic. "I can't!" responded the Maserati's steersman. Nuntio Dolores was moving forwards without the aid of its human crew. Its motions were uncoordinated. It raised its volcano cannon and fired, the shot going hopelessly wide. It built up speed, power fist raised. The Ataris machine was moving back, guns on them matching Nuntio Dolores pace for pace. The charging coils of Exultant glowed a dangerous blue. Hey Netrunner, welcome, welcome. We're in the middle of a giant mecha fight. "Brace!" yelled the Maserati Censorius. Exultant opened fire with all of its remaining weapons. Beams of devastating energy crashed into Nuntio Dolores' front. The first void shield evaporated, then the second, each failure sending lumens dancing within the Cizella and burning out circuits with feedback surges. The third shield fell, brought down by a combination of the Meteor's storm and Exultant's guns. A laser blaster beam burst through the last shield and hit Nuntio Dolores square where its heart would have been, if it were a man. The Titan shuddered. Secondary explosions banged off like stubber fire in the lower decks. One of the Maserati screamed and clawed at his helmet. Fire flickered inside the cabinet of a burned-out cogitator. Exultant began powering its weapons for the final kill. "No," said Heretic. "No!" He shut his eyes, forcing himself to ignore the situation outside, and dived deep into the manifold. Nuntio Dolores had been shocked into quiescence. Wasting no time, Heretic pictured himself as a slayer of gods, and enveloped the machine's spirit in his soul. Neural interfacing realigned. When he opened his eyes again, he was looking back out of the machine's augury arrays. "Forwards!" screamed Heretic. He had no time to wait for the others to rejoin the manifold. The strain of dominating the Titan on his own threatened to burn out his mind, but he forced the machine into a headlong charge. The others rallied, their mental presences floating into the manifold and conjoining with the machine, and the Princeps Nuntio Dolores rammed into the enemy, knocking it hard. Their minds once more locked in total synchronization. Heretic, the Ariok weapons Maserati, and the Titan punched forward like a pugilist in the ring. The Ariok's inbuilt mega-bolters chewed up the metal flesh of Nuntio Dolores' foe, then slammed into the cockpit head. Auger lenses burst. Half the shell of the head was annihilated. Heretic caught a most satisfied glimpse of Maserati flailing in fires fed by ruptured oxygen piping as the Titan reeled backwards and fell into a slump. It attempted to rise and was still, its face still burning. "Engine kill! Engine kill! Engine kill!" the Titan's tallying system announced. Heretic's Titan thrust forward its mighty chin and let out a silent bellow. War horns worked without effect in the vacuum, but the cry was heard in every machine of the Legio Volpa, and they responded in kind. Of course he wasn't going to die. He's the main antagonist of this. Stepping back from his victim, Heretic Nuntio Dolores took stock. The debris storm was racing away, taking its deadly hail with it, and leaving a field of wrecked god machines in its wake. Many were dead on both sides, small fires burning in their shells where atmospheric cyclers still worked to feed the hungry flames. Vavin's machines still stood, but was silent, so no response could be drawn from the Princeps Senioris. The war raged on. Heretek came back into himself. Ataris were gaining the upper hand. The Firebrand's charge had broken the Deathstalker's formation, and combat had devolved into a series of one-on-one fights. This was war as fought by gladiators. Ataris outnumbered them. Enemy engines paced around those of Legio Volpa, raking them with weapons fire from multiple angles. The outflanking maneuver under the cover of the storm had been unexpected, bold, and very nearly disastrous for the Deathstalkers. There remained one last card to play. The counter in the MIU ticked down to 0. "All Titans!" he shouted his mind, sending his and Nuntio Dolores' combined will out into the Demi-Legio as an undeniable command. "Disengage Sensoria now!" Heretek was past caring if he was obeyed or not. He shut down his own sensorium. 3 terrible, sightless seconds crept by, a darkness rocked by weapons impact, while Nuntio Dolores bridled again at his control, and then there was light. Somehow it penetrated through the shuttered windows, a searing luminescence that outshone even the blinding glare of engine death sent wounding shards into the Cizella of Nuntio Dolores. The blades of light moved around and passed. "Re-engage Sensorium!" Heretek commanded. Nuntio Dolores opened its eyes. The sun had joined their struggle. Pulsing aftershocks of radiance washed over the battlefield. The void and everything in it was lost to a haze of white. Heretek could barely see, and these little storms were but the following waves of a stellar tsunami. A discharge of highly energized photons bullied out of Theta Garmin. By the arcane sciences of the new Mechanicum, it hurt his very being to look into the brilliance, but he could see. Legio Ataris were blind, so too were the fleets of the Imperial Army and Navy. Many of the great ships warring in the void drifted powerless, overwhelmed by the flare's electromagnetic pulse, but fewer of the War Master's forces were affected. Through the backwash of interference, a coded signal burst on all frequencies, conveyed to void ship, machine, man, and all things in between. Execute. Heretek grinned wolfishly behind his many masks, behind the face of the Titan, behind the collar of brass, behind the stretched facsimile of humanity he wore on his face. Something savage snarled. He signaled out a staggering Reaver Titan in Ataris gold, red, and black, and moved into attack. Slaughter was upon the firebrands. Heretek at the fore. Hey, Hyasa, welcome, welcome. And yes, Netrunner, this is one of the few continuing times I'll be able to use Chibi Padoru Obsidia before it is seasonally inappropriate. Taking a sip of the old Wawa. Chapter 21. An offer re-evaluated. 3 days passed as Heretek wrestled with his decision. During that time, his headache tortured him to the point of madness. It was a pain he would have gladly endured if it would bring him back to the mastery of his war machine. The moment Nuntio Dolores had slipped free of his guidance tormented him. First accusations of cowardice, now this. He didn't think the lapse had been noticed, but if it had happened once, it could happen again. He would be finished. In the end, he could see no other way. He had to approach the Magos. If we do corporate America rules, you can start using it again next August. Damn, Hyasa, you right as hell. Artem Protoss made his lair in the bowels of the Gardamon hub, past the sector set aside for his black-clad brethren, beyond the furthest reach of life support. When Protoss refused his summons, but offered instead an invitation, Heretek set out prepared. One glance at the map printed on the flimsy told him he should be... What? That's... Oh, okay, I was like, that sentence is odd, but it's because He set out prepared. One glance at the map printed told him he should be, like the feeling of being prepared. It's an odd way to phrase it. Sections of the hub around the Magos' home were lacking air, gravity, or warmth. The route passed through several ruinous halls, so on his back Heretic bore an air flask, and under his arm he carried his war helm. Cuff seals proofed his uniform battlesuit against vacuum. A heated undertunic would keep him alive. He looked as if he were planning a jaunt into open space, and to all intents he was. So he ignored the looks from the menials as he trudged down level after level. He took stairwells and spiralways in preference to lifters. This is a penance, he reminded himself as he set foot upon the 19th stairway. Many more were to come. There was a particular beauty to be found in the deep places of the hub. Frozen falls of water and waste joined floors to ceilings. Collages of bodies decorated ruptured decks, glued together by atmosphere frost, in blued artworks that evoked the suffering of man. Heretic paused by many of these marvels only briefly, but one made him stop for several minutes. A companionway led him through one lightless hall into another, much the same. The walk had become separated from the wall in the second and spiraled down in rickety loops towards the bottom where it was, incredibly, still attached. There was no air in that place. The wall was breached by a diagonal slash 400 meters long, the legacy of a lance hit that had played mercilessly down the hub's outer fabric. Through the blackened gap crowded with spheres of boiled-off metal solidified again in the chill of the void, the atmosphere of Theta Garmin 5 was visible. Hey, Alistair! Collages of baddies decorating the text. Would you like to see a collage of baddies, Alistair? Welcome, welcome. The planet filled the gash from end to end with a jade landscape of shifting storms grinding against each other in swirling, interlocked, laminar bands, each one a different shade of brilliant green. What entranced Heretic was not this natural wonder, but the effect of the war upon it. Brilliant splashes burst over the atmosphere as debris rained down from the shattered orbitals around the planet. No artifice of man was mighty enough to truly entrap a world the size of Theta Garmin 5. A body like Iridium might be caged in industry, but the gas giant was too large to be shackled for long. For millennia, humanity had bled off its hydrogen and had made not the slightest impact upon its being. Men were ticks on worlds of that size. Now the host had noticed them and scratched. A bombardment of stupendous scale fell into the world, dragged there by Theta Garmin 5's massive gravity well. Orbitals, ships, stray munitions, clouds of ice, bodies, everything was sucked into the planetary body. It was relentless, merciless, a revenge beyond the comprehension of the little creatures who scurried so earnestly about the galaxy. You'll leave it to the Emperor's Children battle purchase. Hey, Odin! Welcome, welcome! Beautiful, said Heretic. His voice was breathy in his helm. It was not designed for extended void operations, and condensation fogged the armor glass, but he stayed there a while, watching the patterns of golden circles form, link, and disappear, as all man's art was swallowed by the indomitable might of the gas giant. He resumed his journey only when the spin of the hub took away the vista, and presented him instead with the blankness of near planetary space. You're still hungry despite eating all my brie? Well, I don't like brie very much, so you're welcome to it. Enjoy. Protos was expecting him, of course. Heretic emerged through jets of decontamination gases into the laboratory of a meticulous madman, because every madman works in a laboratory, not a laboratory. There were many models, he remembered that later. Small-scale reproductions of titans shot through with pulsing organic growths. They were no bigger than human babies, and not particularly finely made. He dismissed them and did not understand their significance, not until it was far too late. Hey, that genie problem, welcome, welcome. A flicker of lights informed Heretic it was safe to remove his helm. He did not trust the signals, but did so anyway. There was a difference in pressure. His air supply was of higher density and gushed out vigorously into Protos's laboratory, Only when equalized, did the hot stink of Protoss's lair rush in to take its place. Metal heated by electricity, spoiling meat and 1,000 chemical acidities. Protoss descended from the ceiling. Mechadendrites spread behind his back like the additional arms of heathen gods. Cloak billowing, blurting binaric cant that made Heretek's head thrum painfully. Theatrical bastard, the princeps said. He spat on the floor, only partly for effect. The taste of the air was coating his throat with an unpleasant film. You didn't make this easy for me. Protoss came to a halt a meter over the floor. He pressed his metal hands together in a mockery of prayer. Their purely mechanical nature a clashing contrast with his smooth skin, old man's face, which currently wore the singularly most patronizing expression Heretek had ever seen. On the contrary, I made it very easy for you. Protoss's robe moved in a way suggestive of a shrug performed without shoulders. I was rebuffed. It is now required that you prove yourself. You know why I came. Why else would you seek me out? You thought to summon me? Well, that is actually much harder to do than I thought it was. Hey, Zara. Oh, you're so sweet. Protoss shook his head slowly, his smile avuncular as he admonished Heretek. I am not summoned. We, the 8 Magi of Sotanul, go where we please. The likes of you make requests of me, Princeps Majoris. He hovered lower to the floor. You want the power I offer? On your knees. I'm dying IRL from doing Protoss's voice. It's the initial way I did it was a lot more throat action than I thought it was gonna be, and that strained. Heretek pulled a face but knelt. Oh, great and powerful machine priest, he said sarcastically. Grant me the power you offered to me before, and which I so rudely rejected. That is not good enough, said Protoss. You know what, said Heretek, clambering back up to his feet. I don't care. You came to me for a reason. You did not simply select me at random. You wanted me in particular. I'm here. It is your turn to take it or leave it, adept. And why do you want what I have to offer? Protoss hovered forwards, hands clasped now like a merchant about to close a favorable deal. Because I want power. I fought with the Taurus today and they nearly won. I don't want that to happen again, or this war will never end. Protoss laughed. If that were the only reason you were here, then you would have accepted before. I offered you the certainty of victory, and you rebuffed me. Then I seek the holy synthesis of man and machine you also offered, said Heretek. Wrong, said Ardim Protoss with sudden anger. Your control left you, didn't it? Don't lie to me. I reviewed your data capture after the battle. Nuntio Dolores nearly threw you out. He sniggered, a juvenile noise coming from one so old and supposedly wise. This is the problem with your Order's creed. You're aware of the physical infirmities your quest for total union places upon you. Well, it is damaging to the MIU and the Titan too. You cannot have what you so desire by normal means. You foolish, vain creature! The attainment of total unity is like approaching the speed of light in the materium. The closer one is to one's goal, the harder it becomes until it is impossible. Heretek looked up at the Magos ruefully. If I told you you were right, then I would be pleased, because all of my kind like to be right. That satisfies me. I will do what you wish. Are you brave and devoted to your gods, and sure of purpose? There are choice words I could use here, but I'll refrain, said Heretek. You know I am all those things and more. Give me what I want. Give me mastery over my machine, enjoyed by no man before. Give me back control. Protos smiled. Oh, my dear princeps, I can give you far more than that. It's a fun voice to do, but Jesus Christ, that is difficult to do for long speeches. Thank you for the head pat, Zara. I'm just topping off my Wawa. Woo! See, I love doing the Tech Priest voices because they're just really fun to do, but man, they're quite hard. Okay. Chapter 22. The Ritual. The door opened, banishing the dark and casting a painful blade of light across Heretek's face. He squinted against it. Once again, there was a figure silhouetted in the door. The princeps' life had adopted a new rhythm. It's time, princeps, the figure said. The man who came for him was not one Terrant Heretek recognized. He had the short stature of a lower-class man, and though his clothes were rich, they had obviously been provided to him by someone of means. He was cloaked from head to toe in dark red robes, cinched about the waist by a belt of brass chain. Ridiculous cult affectations, Heretek thought. The man was probably no higher than a Deleuze, one of the Legio peons. Though lowly were always the first to tread easy roads to power. He would get none, of course. If he were lucky, he might not suffer too much as he was used to fulfill some greater man's goal. Heretek wondered how many civilizations had been toppled at the hands of unwitting poor. Naturally, it always happened for the benefit of powerful men. The poor were levers to be pulled, their sacrifices shifting the positions of influence about, but nothing really changed. Not in the long run. The Emperor on Terra was living proof of that. Humanity was a race with a fatal addiction to tyrants. Man, really, this book predicted 2025 like nobody's business. The thing about the oppressed, thought Heretek, is that they remain oppressed no matter what they do. It is their role in life. Far better, he thought, if they accepted their allotted station and did not struggle against it. Terrant Heretek was a powerful man. He would still be powerful after this ritual, this pompous fellow enjoying a few crumbs of influence with his theatrics and his silly costume would gain precisely nothing from it except a sense of misguided self-importance. All things have their place and time, he reminded himself. Rituals required certain elements, jumped-up peasants and smucks included. Heretek kept his thoughts to himself and tried to banish contempt from his voice when he got up from his bed and spoke the words he had been told to speak. He just about managed the tone of seriousness expected. I am ready. Broski calling the man Emperor of God kind of tyrant. Absolutely heretical. Well, Alistair, this man is literally a princeps of Horus, Lupercal, so he is a heretic, or heretic by kind of definition. Mind you, he's also taking this incredibly, haughty tone over this, this Khorne worshipping cultist when the tech priest is literally going to be merging a greater demon with his fucking, with his titan. So he's gonna be real smug immediately up until he gets full-on demon corrupted. The man bowed low and gestured with a velvet-gloved hand. The material was black, his middle finger ringed with a piece of cheap jewelry, displaying the rune of the war god. Heretek rolled his eyes towards the ceiling. Show respect, my lord, said the man in a hissing whisper. Heretek frowned. The man had been looking at the floor. How had he seen? I'm nervous, I'm sorry. You should be nervous, said the man. There was a gloating edge to what he said that Heretic did not care for. Lead on, Heretic said. The man bobbed his head again, then turned. Heretic followed. He'd been told to go bare-chested and barefoot, so he had. His combat fatigues were a jumpsuit, so he wore his dress uniform trousers instead, leaving him feeling simultaneously over and underdressed. The deck was cold under his feet. Drafts of recycled air stirred the hair on his chest. He hadn't truly appreciated how cold it was on the station. It should have been warmer. Often overheating was a problem in void installations, with vacuum being a fine insulator, but this place was frigid. He tried to think if it was always that cold, but somehow he couldn't. He experienced the first shiver of unease deep in his gut. Is it just me, or has it gotten colder? He asked. Silence, said the man with a backwards glance. If you must be distracted, meditate on the might of God of War. The experience was preposterous, but it appeared the whole hub had been brought into the performance. The station corridors were deserted but brightly lit. The ever-present machine song of life support systems hummed away in the background. He did not feel like he was about to undertake a sacred ceremony. Rather, he was reminded of the childish initiation rituals he'd been forced to undergo at the Legio Scholastica at the hands of the other pupils. On the route, he saw no other people. They went a way Heretic had never been before, and soon he was lost. Although he prided himself on his sense of direction, a heaviness overcame his thoughts, and he heard again the far-off blare of brazen horns. The sound had come to him many times, although never so clearly as then. It was distant, as always. For the first time he was sure he heard it, rather than imagined it. He stopped and looked about. Why should I meditate on the might of Kratos? This is the wrong franchise. Did you hear that? He asked. The man chuckled. There was something not quite right about his voice. Heretic decided it was too wet. He's calling to you, Khorne, the Lord of Skulls. Heretic's stomach clenched. In Legio, they rarely said the god's name. He was not superstitious, but hearing it aloud frightened him, and he did not scare easily. You heard it too, he said agitatedly. Come, said the man. We have a way to go. I'm going to take some water. Wettening my voice as well. He was led into service conduits so cramped with piping there was hardly room for a man to pass. Smooth plating gave way to grill work that bit into his feet. It got colder all the time, and his misgivings grew. The sense of unreality only increased. Hidden in the humming workings of the hub, Heretic heard the blasts of horns 7 more times, though these subsequent soundings teased him, staying right on the edge of hearing. He's getting teased and edged. The man began to mutter to himself, nasty words with sharp edges and wounding sounds. It got colder yet. Heretic's feet became numb. His blood flowed sluggishly, each heartbeat a congested thump in his sinuses. Presently, they came to a door so mundane in appearance, Heretic almost laughed with relief when the man stopped beside it and with exaggerated solemnity gestured at its chipped, hazard-striped metal. The portal to a new life, he said portentously. Are you ready? The sounds of liquids moving through the pipes, the humming of poor-quality lumen globes in the light fittings, the grumbled and short-lived whines and bangs of lifter mechanisms, all conspired to undermine the moment some of Heretic's self-assuredness returned. And yet the worm of fear continued to thread its way around his guts. Getting teased and edged by the wet cultist, man. Khorne sure has changed. No, this was Khorne in his wild experimental phase, because this is 30k, not 40k. He was a lot more about teasing, edging, and wet men then. "I am," said Heretic. "Then enter." A solitary green lumen above the door switched on. The chipped door moved aside very slowly. Heretic's breath caught in expectation of what he might see beyond. When the room was revealed, Heretic nearly laughed again. The chamber beyond was a simple octagonal robing room for Deleuze working in hazardous environs. A second door faced the one Heretic stood in, and a single bench ran around every facet save those pierced by the doors. Hooks were attached to the walls in sets of 4 above the bench, and from them hung heavy plasticized suits with integral gauntlets and boots. They hung like deflated men, their cylindrical headpieces bowed by the weight of the visors each sported. 7 of his fellow princeps stood within, all naked to the waist and bootless like himself, all shivering. They were each accompanied by an attendant like Heretic's. The only thing out of the ordinary in the scene was a large brass pot heating over a portable coil in the dead center of the room. Vapors rose from it, carrying with them the scent of blood. "What are we doing?" Heretic said. The others looked at him. They displayed a variety of emotions. They were princeps, so none exhibited fear, although 1 or 2 certainly felt trepidation. The others were scornful of his lack of respect. All save Patian Clen of Maniple 5, who shared Heretic's uneasy contempt. "We can begin," said one of the other attendants. Heretic knew that voice. "Kaysen? Kaysen?" said Heretic. Heretic's own guide pushed him against the sole vacant facet of the room. "Unhand me!" he growled, catching the fellow about the wrist. His arm was thin, weak. "You are to do as we command," said the man who was almost certainly Kaysen. "You'll stand where I say." Heretic looked to his fellows. He was the only Princeps Majoris in this room, and by extension the one voted most often to serve as Princeps Senioris within the group. He was their leader. They watched him carefully to see what he would do. He gave a smile that was mostly false bravado, and cast the man's hand aside roughly. "Very well," he said, holding up his arms. "Very well, have at it." "Kaysen, perform your task. Although if I'd known you were involved in this foolishness, you would not have remained in my employ. This is a version of the blooding, yes? A ritual I've undergone many times. Get on with it." Kaysen faced him. Black bandages around his face provided the sense of depthless shadow within the hood. It was a cheap trick, but even so, there was something inhuman about his eyes. "This one shows bravery when he is scared," Kaysen said to his fellows. "They're all scared, these mighty warriors." He gloated now. "Do not listen to them. They shame themselves in the eyes of the blood god. We have work ahead to make them worthy." "How dare—" "Silence!" said Kaysen. "I've done much to prepare you for this moment, although you did not see. I will not have you spoil it. Mark them! Make them ready!" There was an undertone of Kaysen's words that killed Heretic's outrage dead. He lowered his hand. Paintbrushes were lifted from the pot and moved to the princeps' skin. Dripping red upon the floor, the warm marks they drew over Heretic's body did nothing to dispel the cold. He watched this servant, the leader of the cultists. Though he was dressed identically to the others, he assuredly was in charge. The princeps to this gaggle of moderati. His influence on them was subtle. Kaysen hardly spoke to the others, but he exuded an air of ready violence, and they shied from him when he came near. Doing makeup with the boys. I never knew he had it in him, thought Heretic. Warm blood ran over Heretic's body from the sigils they painted. It dried quickly, pulling his skin taut, until his entire body was covered with patterns of itching tightness. The acolytes worked in silence. The delicate movements of the brush relaxed him, and he was lulled into a meditative state. Beneath the calm, a fury stirred. reminiscent of the machine spirit of Nuntio Dolores, although far bigger, an infinity of endless bloodthirsty rage. It called to him with wordless roars and the blaring of brass horns. "We are done," said Kaysen. Heretek's eyes opened, cracking the crust of blood painted over them. He felt like he'd been sleeping standing up, although he did not remember falling asleep or even shutting his eyes. The room was shifting, stretching, like shimmering air over sun-baked mudflats, or an overheated engine vent. "Follow," Kaysen beckoned over his shoulder. The acolytes lined the princeps up. All were as dazed as Heretek, some more so. There was a febrile light in their eyes. One of them, Bossak, Heretek thought was jittery, hands clenching, mouth working, a man on the edge of violent outburst. "Hey, Christy, welcome, welcome. Always happy to have my favorite waifu here." Why couldn't he tell who this man was? Was it Bossak? He knew them all, but he didn't know them at all. He couldn't recognize them. His thoughts weren't his own. He felt drugged. No, that was wrong. Was he? He was intoxicated by anger. He wanted to fight. "The way is open. Open the way. The door parts to the eightfold path," sang the chief acolyte. His voice was no longer Kaysen's. Such a pompous thing to say to a door in a room of such mundane purpose. Then the door opened, and he did not seem so foolish anymore. Hard orange light flooded the room. Furnace blast roared in. The shock of the heat was so hot when he breathed that it seemed too thick to pass into his lungs. He choked. The scent of hot iron and brass was all pervasive. It was like drowning in blood. A giant chamber lay beyond, surprising in its size and full of diabolical industry. Drums boomed an aggressive, arrhythmic contest. "Onwards," said the cult leader. One by one, they were led into orange light, and a scene of unreality unfolded before him. Dominating the hall were 8 warlord titans arrayed around a giant octet graven into the floor. The symbol had been cut half a meter deep. Sorry, one second. Had been cut half a meter deep into the decking, shearing through wiring and pipes under the plating with a precise, neat carelessness for their function. The titans stood inactive at the points of the octet. They did not appear to have been tampered with, but in the volcanic atmosphere, they radiated a sense of divine potency that Heretic was sure owed nothing whatsoever to the machine god. From one wall, Nuntio Dolores stared at him with hungry eyes, like a trusted animal companion gone wild. Heretic and the others were led to posts set between the feet of each titan, from which dangled chains of blackened metal. Scratches in the suit coating them showed a pale gold, suggesting they were of brass. The drums were the discharge of giant guns. They were the pounding of axes on shields. They were the rocks smashing into skulls. Heretic let himself be chained to the post between Nuntio Dolores' legs. With a curious sense of detachment, he wondered why he did not resist. But by the time the sluggish thought had wound itself through the folds of his brain, he was held fast, arms crossed above his head. It was at this moment that Heretic realized he'd fucked up. Nuntio Dolores' torso projected over him, its massive chin a boulder held in place by some tenuous force on the edge of breaking. Its weapons framed the hall in a murderer's embrace. What purpose the room had before was difficult to say with any certainty. It was vast. Its ceilings suggested an assembly yard or manufactorum for larger components of Gardamon's hub's output. It could have been a foundry or a smeltery, but though it was equipped with 8 giant crucibles of molten metal, so hot they glowed orange they seemed too primitive to have been used in the making of voidcraft. They were crude things, the tools of steam engineers, fired by mounds of coals and mounted on cast iron carts on iron rails. Huge banners so caked in gore their designs were invisible, shifted in the updrafts coming off the liquid. Small figures moved everywhere between giant machines. Many were clad in the black of the new Mechanicum, but the majority were in the blood-purple robes of cult acolytes, and their number only seemed to increase as Heretic drifted in and out of the moment. 1 second. I'm gonna have some more water. I'm gonna readjust my headset. How did it come to this? Thought Hairtech. A moment of desperate clarity settled on him when he saw the situation as it was. Once he had fought for the imperial truth. Now he was enthralled to a primitive cult. A profound dismay had him. Then blew away, cobweb fine, as he slipped and fell into blood-warm torpor. The promise of power beckoned. The brazen horns sang louder in his mind. The drums thundered out their conflicted barrage. Hairtech's head pounded with every sounding, like it too were a drum, and his heart also. His eyes swam, refusing to focus, and when they did, he was not sure of what he looked on. Reality smeared, flickered, was replaced by dark images of black flames and screeching monsters. He tried to blink this vision away, but it would not go. When it disappeared and the hall returned, Apostle Vorjik Kral was suddenly in the room. Perhaps Hairtech had passed out from the heat and come around. The creatures would have some sort of drug-induced dream, for by now he was certain he'd been poisoned somehow. Some time had passed. Krail wasn't there when he was, dominating everything around him. He was the sole transhuman in the hall. We love our transhumans. Towering over the unmodified humans and the new Mechanicum alike. Burnished armor reflected the glow of molten metal. The flames painted on his shoulder plates danced with a life of their own. A line of chained, naked slaves, painted red with blood from their shaven heads to the soles of their feet, were led towards the crucibles. They were ecstatic, wailing, and singing, their eyes so wide the whites were visible from all the way across the hall. Krail was to perform the ritual, but not alone. Ardum Protos had also appeared from nowhere, and was working his way around the circle with a band of lesser tech priests. They sang hard hosannas and binaric cant to the god of blood. The air thickened. Clouds of red smoke spilled from their sensors. Jabbering cyber constructs wheeled over them like vultures, drizzling vitae from fanged maws. It took the tech priests an age to pass around the great circle, but in no time at all, it seemed. Protos was standing in front of Hairtech. The tech priest stopped his procession and approached the princeps. Hairtech raised his head with great difficulty. It felt as if it were full of lead. Protos watched him with interest as he forced his tongue to move. "What is this sorcery?" he asked. His words were lumpen, poorly formed, barely intelligible, but Protos understood. "It is not sorcery, not quite. This god does not approve of magic tricks. Call it an invitation instead," said Protos. "All done to the most stringent scientific principles, naturally." Hairtech's head fell forward. Protos reached out a metal hand to steady it. The prosthetic was so hot Hairtech's skin sizzled. "You were most difficult to convince. I'm glad you saw sense," he said. "Power of unimaginable potency will soon be yours. All you must do is bear a little pain." Hairtech tried to speak, but his words would not form in his brain, let alone his mouth. "What was done to Astagar will be done again. This time it will be better. Our two gods working in one mechanism, with but a few souls required to seal the bargain." He let Hairtech's head drop. "All for your benefit, of course. The gift of iron, of brass, and of blood is yours. I am almost envious." I'm gonna probably have to change that voice. Woo! It is really straining my throat to do his voice. all this femme voice work is not coinciding well with these tech priests. Droning chants receded. Hairtech's mind slipped further into redness. The horns blared constantly. The ring of blades filled his ears. The next he knew, he was surrounded by the thunder of drums, and a massive armored hand gripped him by the head. "For the glory of the Pantheon undivided, we beseech you, Khorne, provide us with the might of your right arm." More words followed. Knives flashed. The patterns on Heretic's skin were renewed as his flesh was opened up, and his own blood overwrought the flaking vitae painted there earlier. Heretic's body screamed, but the pain was distant, and from a far battlefield he looked on his weakness and despised it. Time blinked. Giant machines around the hall whooped with tortured thunders. Lightning streamed upwards. Heretic was shaking from fatigue and loss of blood. The drums reached a brief crescendo, chanting scaled, exultant heights. Krail was far away again, brandished his maul. It dripped with gore. Teams of sweating slaves tugged enormous chains, and the crucibles rolled to the edge of the octet, hit wedges, and toppled forward under the force of their own momentum, pouring oceans of spilling metal into the design. The symbol acted as a giant mold. Surging waves of metal rushed down the arms, meeting in the middle with a loud slap of liquid. Droplets burst upwards, showering over the worshippers. They screamed in holy agonies as their robes burst into flames. Krail dropped the head of his maul to the deck with a clang. With a perfunctory brutality, the lines of slaves were shoved into the incandescent metal by the singing cultists. They toppled in neat lines, shrieking out devotions as they plunged under. They rose up, flailing, screaming for real now, human torches whose dying wails joined the chorus of insane worship. The sacrifices were the final act. From high above, a furious voice roared, coming closer, rapidly, as if falling from a far-off heaven. Composed of inchoate sounds, the roaring was nevertheless possessed of sentience and raged against its summoning. Another howling voice joined it, followed by a third and fourth, until 8 bellowing demigods joined the choirs of humans screaming out their dedication to the god of blood and war. The roaring descended until it drowned out all else, but Heretic saw nothing. Red lightning sheeted across the hall. Something heavy impacted on Nuntio Dolores, and the machine sagged with the blow. Burning heat blasted from the Titan, immolating the banners arranged behind it. One by one the other roars cut out, and the Titans were bowed by invisible impacts. The shouting, drumming, blaring, singing praise of Khorne lost its final pretense at musicality, breaking apart into a discordant cacophony of screams and shouts. Worshippers turned upon one another. Knives flashed. Blood hissed on the cooling octet. Heretic's body filled with uncontrollable anger. His muscles swelled. His thoughts fled, yanking against the chains that bound him until his wrists wept blood. He howled, and in a new demonic voice, Nuntio Dolores howled with him. Part 3. The Titandeath. Hopefully we go back to the girls soon. There was wind upon her skin. The breeze was forge hot. From distant prairies of burnished brass came the scent of burned oil and heated metal. Her hair was a frizz of swarf that rattled in the breeze. Sharp and unsettling metal trees stretched down to plains of copper plates. Tiny metallic beasts ran through sharp steel grasses. Iron birds clattered in a yellow sky. In the forest, chimney pines trailed black smoke that caught upon high thermals, where they wound together in double helices before smudging into a pall that smeared the light of the sun into orange, lemon, and rich pollutant brown. Her body turned with a heat that was inimical to human life. Her heartbeat was a single moment drawn out forever, an inferno blaze with no sound, no pulse. When she uncurled her fists, her fingers were guns, her feet were spread claws, her eyes were glass. Children made of plasteel alloys crowded her legs, their underdeveloped cannon arms reaching up for her, pleading for attention she could not spare. She ignored them. She had so many children she did not know their names. Their squealing war horns went unanswered, her nervous oculi fixed on the distant place where metal met sky. There was something wicked on the horizon, and it was coming, for them all. Movement caught her many senses: infrared, seismic, sonar, aural, radar, lidar, and all the other machine blessings that were hers by birthright. Her sight was layered with many palettes waiting to be selected, each promising the revelation of a different set of secrets. She heard sounds so deep they troubled the planet's molten core, and so high no living thing could perceive them. The taps of hooves, or hoofs, upon, that's a weird way to do that, it should be hooves, upon the fairest landscape entered into her awareness. A clockwork horse twice life size galloped past. It seemed to her no bigger than a toy. She recognized it with a melancholy so deep it threatened to drown her. Homage! When she called to it, her voice was the wordless blare of a war horn. The horse panicked. Exposed springs unwound quickly at its hindquarters, driving gears that drove pistons that slammed cast bronze legs so hard into the ground it galloped faster than any horse of flesh or blood could. It was not fast enough. Homage! The Great Mother called. Again her voice was the earth-shaking wail of war horns. Venting towers on the horizon spat fire in response. She forced her way through the squalling children, crushing trees to scrap. The horse fled, pores fed by syringes weeping a sweat of blood down its steaming flanks. She bent down and uncurled her weapon fingers to trap the horse. It switched directions and she missed. Her enormous fist dented the ground. Homage! She cried. Another blare, polyphonic and mournful, blasted across the metallic world. Her hand slammed down again, this time in front of the clockwork horse, causing it to rear. Mohana reached to catch it, bullets from her fingers tearing up the rusty soil, steam whistling from pipes in her knuckles. Wild now with panic, the clockwork steed kicked and bucked. She tried to calm it, but her words were the uniform aggressive blare of battle music. A finger touched its rear leg, a gentle caress that was deadly to the horse's delicate mechanism. The lake broke. A spring unwound and burst free. Tiny cogs bounced across the wrought landscape in gentle, random musicality. The horse screamed. Its forelegs sparked from the iron earth, but it could not rise. Homage! She blared, with this time the horns captured something of human speech rising and falling the way the name would, though they presented no meaningful sound. Mother! The children wailed, their war horns now the flat-toned grind of malfunctioning servitors. She swung about, swatting them down in her clumsy immensity. Great Mother! Another voice, booming, human, it came from the sky. She looked up. The sun had gone, a black hole replaced it. The clouds were striped with ribbons of data streaming towards oblivion. Within the void was something vast. Great Mother! Said the voice. Non-functional, synaptic disconnect. Neural network non-associable. Machine binding 70% and rising. The second voice spoke not in words, but in the rapid pulse screeching of lingua technis. She remembered eyelids. They fluttered. Sensations spread from them, outlining her face in the warm bath of preservative fluid. She is waking, said the human voice. Negative, said the machine. No, she returns! Mohana Mankata Vai awoke. Mohana Mankata Vai's dream was slow and fading. Double sight swam around her visual centers. The blurred white-gray nothingness of the amnion, sticky against her eyelids, slipped over a dropship interior rendered in pin-sharp resolution by Luxor Victoria's augers. The views fought with each other, neither of them finding the upper hand, leaving them both indistinct. A remote command suppressed her negative vision with a painful jolt. To be so under the control of another that she could be blinded at will outraged her. The Luxor Victoria, still inactive, grumbled in its sleep. There were many tech priests on the dropship hangar floor, and more upon a gantry crammed with machinery whose cabling snaked up into the Titan's head. She looked out solely through the machine's eyes now. The sense of her own body, never near, seemed far distant. Magos Principia Militaris Goten Mu Cassinius resolved himself in her optical sense. The Vox Omni The Vox Omni Machina of Malfor, Cryosphane, was at its Jesus Christ. That's the most made up 40k bullshit to put one after another. Rising and lowering himself upon his pistoned legs. Rarely do I see both heads of the Legios. Oh, it's her voice, sorry. Rarely do I see both heads of the Legio's priesthood together. Matters must be serious. Moana tried for levity. Her voice was not her own, even slightly. The emitters on the Titan's head shouted every word without a trace of her modulation, removing any scrap of humanity. The infospheric patterns of the Magi betrayed their discomfort. It is almost time, she said, trying vainly to keep her voice to a human level. It is, said Goten Mew respectfully. You are on the cusp of ascension. Your union with the machine god is not far away. I will dissipate into the manifold. You shall be the first to become one with this Titan. You will forever be a part of it, said the Vox Omni Machina with religious awe. Your imprint will guide those who come after. No one else will ever have this honor. There can be only one who is first. I shall still be dead, said Mohana Mankata Vai. She paused. I do not remember being deactivated. It was an emergency precaution, said Goten Mew. You suffered a severe cognitive break when you learned of Princeps Esha Ani Mohana's wounding. Do you remember? You were on the wall at Hansu. Princeps Esha Ani Mohana was ambushed. Another pause filled with dread. Does my daughter live? She lives, said Chrysophane, and she did you credit assuming leadership of the Legio while you were inactive. Though Magos Principia Militaris Gotenmu Cassinius has been taking all strategical decisions and will continue to do so until the succession is ratified. Until I'm dead, said Mohana darkly. Enjoying the electric field of discomfiture spiraling around the adepts at her bluntness. How long have I slept? She asked. Weeks, great mother, said Chrysophane. Weeks, she said. Then it is almost time. It is, I regret, said Goten Mew. And the war? The war goes as it did, said Goten Mew. Hansu Hive holds while we maintain control. The Chimus Sea Zone is safe, and Beta Garmin 3 will remain in Imperial hands. There have been several more attempts to attack from the south with enslaved regiments of Garmanites. The first took us unawares, the rest have been less successful. Engine loss is at an acceptable rate. Legio Astorum continues to repulse attacks from the traitors. Loyal forces destroyed the Iron Warriors siege battalion. Since then, the combat efficacy of our attackers has decreased by approximately 20%. Shall I lead my daughters one final time into battle, or do you wake me only to bid me farewell? You are combat capable, said Goten Mew, while you are awake. Alas, we can no longer disconnect you completely from the MIU. If we were to attempt it, you would be subsumed into Luxor in Victoria, for good. No human can remain perpetually attached to the machine in this way, she said. I'm surprised you have not already sent me on my way. Great Mother, your strategic insight is invaluable, said Goten Mew. Do you find my daughter unworthy? She is worthy, said Chrysophane. Continuity is important in these terrible times. We value you, that is all. And there I thought I was the inconvenient nub of flesh required to bring your idols to life, Mohana said. I sense nothing in the Legio infosphere indicating battle approaching. The ship does not move. She paused, reaching further into the invisible web of data linking the Legio together. We are still upon Beta Garmin 3. There is some other reason you have woken me. The question is, what? You are perceptive as ever, said Gotenmu with a small bow. A little over a month ago, the Primarch Sanguinius and Jagatai Khorne arrived at Beta Garmin. The Khorne has committed himself to a hit-and-run campaign throughout the subsector. Sanguinius of the 9th Legion has assumed control over all other Imperial forces. Has he succeeded? Asked Mohana Moncadavai. To an extent, said Gotenmu. You appreciate the level of disorganization here better than most. I do. He has had some success in bringing together Imperial war efforts, continued the Magos Principia Militaris. His vision for the campaign is taking hold. There are, however, difficulties he must contend with, not least dissension between the Titan Legios. Dissension over what? Sanguinius has commanded that the Beta Garmin system be purged of traitors. He wishes to retake Nearcon City as the first action in stabilizing the war. If Beta Garmin 2 can be returned to the Imperial fold, then Horus may be driven back to the edges of the cluster, said Chrysophane. The Legios Titanica are split between those who wish to bring the conflict to a head and force a rapid conclusion in order to halt the attrition we've been suffering these last months, and those who wish to continue the campaign as it is. The latter group fears the scale of the attack Sanguinius proposes will result in their Legio's destruction. You have awoken me to decide what Legio Solaria's course will be. It is not a decision I can make, said Magos Principia Militaris Gotenmu. Not without contravening the agreement between Tigris and the Legio Solaria. Typically, you Magi cannot control that which you create. With good reason, said the Vox Omni Machina. Legio should remain apart from the factionalism inherent to the cult. I will not transgress these sacred oaths, said Gotenmu. What is your decision? More data, she said. Gotenmu's cowled head nodded as one of the tech priests manning a station on the maintenance cradle. He inserted a mechadendrite into an interface port and twisted. The most audacious plan unfolded in Mohana Moncadavai's mind. This is Lord Sanguinius's plan. A score of Legios, hundreds of Titans massed together to take back Nicron City. The third battle for the system capital will be costly in blood and oil, continued Chrysophane. God engines were not made to fight each other this way, as infantry in an army of giants. The destruction unleashed will be unprecedented. Our Legio is particularly ill-suited to this form of battle. Plans, maps, diagrammatical representations, and more flooded Mohana's strategic senses. A scarred, ugly orb swelled in her mind. Beta Garmin 2 was ancient, inhabited by mankind for tens of thousands of years, and bore the scars of careless stewardship. Sanguinius's armies had the traitors boxed into various kill zones on the planet. The greatest concentration held the capital. His legion will take the anvil, said the Magos Principia Militaris. We shall storm the walls. As Gotenmu spoke, specifications of the city's defenses unspooled in the Great Mother's mind. Nicron City's mountainous hives soared up through Beta Garmin 2's polluted skies. Its irregular base was followed with exactitude by a high encircling wall. Graphical flourishes indicated many stretches had been repaired and enhanced by the War Master. The hive was heavily damaged from the previous 2 battles fought over it, but the wall had been strengthened with emplaced heavy guns torn from dead god engines. Her view expanded, taking in the star fortress of the Anvil locked in geosynchronous orbit with the hive. At 300 kilometers above the peak, from the ground it would appear as nothing but a shape among many others, it being out one of hundreds of orbitals crowding the sky, but its armament could level the city, or destroy any attacker who dared to chance the defenses. If the Primarch fails to secure the Star Fortress, then we shall be helpless, said Malfor Chrysophane. We will die. It is a glorious plan, said Mohana, filled with risk, but bold. As to be expected from the great angel, said Gotenmu. It is ruinous, said Chrysophane, his machine warble becoming stridulous. The projected toll in machines and personnel is staggering. We risk not only a few engines here, we risk the whole of the Legio. Wars are not won through timidity, she said. How many other Legios have pledged their support? Of the 27 in this sector of the cluster, 20. 3 are unable, 4 refuse. You suggest Vox Omni Machina that we join this timid quartet? I suggest prudence, Chrysophane rejoined. Magos Principia Militaris Goten Mu, you are the strategist of your binary. What say you? I defer to your judgment, Great Mother, he said. I will gladly calculate the best disposition of Legio support troops to ensure you to achieve your end. For that is the role of the machine god has allotted to me. But I cannot, and I will not make this decision. She allowed the play of data to run through her. It reinvigorated her, fresh as cold water, bracing as the rain. But in the back of her mind she still saw metallic skies and trees of steel. I accept the Primarch's command, but a portion of the Legio will remain here, under the command of Princeps Majoris Esha Ani Mohana. The number? Asked Gotenmu, glad to be relieved of the burden of decision. 2 maniples, no more. I see the Primarch requires defensive forces to be stationed around the hives of this world. A precaution, said Gotenmu. He allowed his enthusiasm for the Primarch strategy to show now he was no longer responsible for following it. The season of vitriol is on us. All non-Legio forces are reducing their operations. Only void-shielded units can operate. Caustic fogs blanket the coast day round. Alkaline squalls are building into persistent storms inland. These have been known to trouble the world for months at a time. The meteorological conditions alone provide us with a fine defense, and will last for the next half-year. The War Master has the majority of his Titans defending Nigron City, said Mohana. Therefore, he has very little offensive capability he can use on this sphere, Gotenmu said. She surveyed the information again. The 2 Magi retreated from her consciousness for a time. She brought herself back before she was lost. Send Esha Ani Mohana and 2nd Maniple to join the forces, guarding the Diviner's Needle. 6th Maniple will merge with the remnants of 10th Maniple and add to the garrison of Caldera City. As you will it, Great Mother. Gotenmu bowed deeply, Chrysophane less so. The Magos Principia Militaris infospheric profile broadcast his satisfaction. Mohana saw now that Gotenmu had been lying about his reluctance to make a decision. They had argued. Had the 2 been in agreement about the matter in the first place, they never would have awoken her. Make the rest of the Legio ready for transit to Beta Garmin 2, she commanded. We walk for the Primarch. I shall lead my daughters into the greatest and most challenging battle we have ever faced. It is fitting I should end my tenure as Great Mother this way. The Vox Omni Machina and the Magos Principia Militaris bowed again. A choir began to sing an exultant song of ultimate victory. Messages passed out through the Legio telling all that the Great Mother marched to war one final time. Beta Garmin 2 was an ugly world. Though the capital of the system and the entire subsector, it was not the most populous. That honor belonged to Beta Garmin III, nor was it the most culturally significant, or even the most productive. A blasted, irradiated wasteland when the Great Principia Imperialis founded at the beginning of the Great Crusade. It had latterly been given over to weapons testing. Every instrument of destruction below exterminatus grade had been unleashed upon its surface, from the humblest lasgun to the mightiest mechanicum ordinatus weaponry. Giant craters riddled its plains, away from the inhabited equator in the desolation zones. Destabilization of tectonic plates had opened vast chasms. The planet's orbits were a crowded graveyard of decommissioned hulks, employed for target practice. The only orbital of any strategic worth was the Anvil. It was a chilly, inhospitable planet warmed unenthusiastically by the Beta Garmin star. The population clustered around its swelling middle in enormous fortress hives, the only legacy of the Dark Ages that had survived intact. But it was upon this inhospitable orb that power had come to rest. From Beta Garmin II, mankind had fought back against the cataclysms of the Age of Strife. 2 great battles had already been fought over the fortress hive. The first under forces dispatched by Lord Khorne at the start of the war, when the Imperium had seized control from a small traitor garrison. The second when Horus' massed armies had taken it back. And now, in the true spirit of relentless escalation, Sanguinius' armada came to take it again. Blood Angel's fleet vessels cleared a descent corridor through the fields of debris surrounding the world. It was slow work, hampered by the danger of void junk impacts as much by the enemy. Defense laser fires spitting up from the high fortresses obliterated more wrecks than it did active ships, and the Anvil, whose presence alone was only a deterrent against invasion, was silent. Much of its capability lost earlier in the war. Suppression strikes against the largest batteries were launched from multiple craft in the Imperial fleet. Explosions flowered across the planet's dayside. Hives burned. The risk of civilians was paid little consideration. From orbit, the bodies of god machines brought low earlier in the war were visible against the uniform drabness of the surface, like the bodies of crushed insects. Towards these corpses, hundreds more war machines came, fresh recruits fed into the slaughter, in a desperate push reminiscent of mankind's first bloody forays into industrialized warfare, millennia ago. I'm going to take a brief break. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Any thoughts they'd like to raise? How they're liking this part of the book so far? Anything you want to say as I drink water and rest my voice for a second? Sorry about that. For whatever reason, talking like that really got my nose really congested for some reason. Well, my apologies. My apologies for my sniffling. Obsidia sniffling ASMR when. The Great Mother's dropship was down first among the Legio. All 6 dropships from the Artemisia deposited their cargoes gently upon the surface, their void shields sparkling under fire, sparkling under fire as they descended, and then again as they returned to the metal-choked anchorages of Beta Garmin II. Mohana Mankadavai needed no time at all to interface fully with Luxor and Victoria. She slipped into its mind without making a ripple in its being, as unconsciously as an elderly human couple, long pair bonded, might join hands as they walked. The idea of Mohana Mankadavai was a ridiculous thing to her now. Only the Titan truly existed, her soul and its machine spirit together, as one, although the sensation of control she had over the twain was an illusion. She was the iridescent film of oil upon a wide lake, soon to be stirred away into nothing and lost. For the time being, Mohana Mankadavai remained the guiding consciousness of the god machine. To the honking blare of alarms and the spinning of warning lumens, dropship wargates fore and aft swung wide. Sickly yellow daylight battled the artificial glow of the transit beacons, followed by a far more aggressive spill of fine dust. It was already drifting inside the ship by the time Only seconds later, the retaining clamps snapped open. Fueling and data lines fell away from the Titans. Mohana Mankatavai's Myrmidons exited with practiced efficiency. The Great Mother was last out, stepping into the gap behind her lead 2 bodyguard machines as the others came round, the dropship to take up position behind her, framing her in a box of plasteel and ceramite. "My daughters, look," she proclaimed. "Is this not glorious?" Through lemon-yellow skies, the might of Mars' empire descended. Scores of Titan dropcraft were putting down under the cover of a suppressive bombardment that shook the planet. They floated down serenely, the effortless appearance of their landing belying the immense efforts needed to keep them aloft. Gravity engines put out a constant thrumming that, when produced by such a number of vessels, created a complex web of noise that wrong-footed the senses and shook the bones. Plasma jets roared with the outrage of captive dragons. Exhaust vents glowed hot. Daggers of blue fire stabbed in the earth when the ships came to land, turning it to steaming glass that landing claws shattered at the weight of the craft sank into the earth. Titans stepped from individual drop coffins, in manifolds from larger ships, and in some instances en masse at full demi-legio. From the maws of giant atmospherically capable conveyors, bigger than the Artemisia or the Tantamon. There was debris upon the plain from millennia of war. Wind-scoured outcrops nearby could have been natural formations, but a cursory scan showed the reinforcement built into them. They were the pilings from long-vanished structures, of which now nothing else remained. Masses of metal beneath the ground where the buried remnants of battles fought at the height of the Age of Strife. While upon the surface, already being swallowed by snaking tendrils of sand and dust, were the blackened shells of armored vehicles, fallen void ships and titans, all dead in the battles for Nikron City. The landing zone was well out of the range of the city's artillery batteries, and so far away even the void-scraping height of Nirkon was lost to the haze choking the air. Nothing but the passage of defense laser blasts were visible, dazzling flashes in the sky, heard as the sharp rolling of artificial thunder, felt through the inconstant fall of microbeads glassed from the dusty air. The Legio ships were under fire. Laser blasts chased them all the way down from orbit to the ground. Imperial Army and Legionis Astartes fighters raced among them, hunting down missiles aimed at the dropcraft. Further out, more aircraft dueled with enemy fighters, keeping them back from the landing zone. The defenses could not be flawless. There were casualties. A coffin ship fell burning through the sky, slightly too fast, outpacing its stately undamaged fellows and breaking apart like a crumpled ration can on impact. The doors burst outwards and the machine inside, already dead, toppled out. The greatest of all the Titans were the great Imperators. Of the many hundred god engines present, there were but 3 on the Loyalist side. War machines so huge they made the mighty Warlord class seem small and pathetic. They were too large to be landed by standard craft. 2 came down in dropships custom built to house them, though of differing designs. They were similar in appearance, bristling with weapons and decorated with the utmost care to glorify the machines within. The third Imperator had no ship large enough to bear it, so instead was suspended in a web of cables and brought down by a dozen laboring freight shuttles, whose engines screamed in complaint at the burden. When the Titan's feet put down, explosive bolts attached to its limbs, Acropolis, weapons, and head blew. The cables slackened, whipping back under the shuttles, and were severed. At the other end, so that they fell like plummeting snakes to the sand, freeing the freight craft to ascend back into orbit. I find it immensely entertaining, the idea that fucking a bunch of, like, dropships are essentially, like, cable dropping a fucking Titan onto a planet from space. Like, we just gotta raw dog this one, guys. The last Imperator down was thus the first to walk. Its movement was saluted by a growing wave of Warhorn song that repeated and strengthened as the immense doors to the other Imperator's dropships swung wide, and they too swept out. These machines were the gods of the god engines, and were greeted as such. A path was cleared rapidly to the front so they might walk by and be feted. Magna Bellifica, War Scorn, and Terra's Calling, of the Legios Astorum, Graphonica, and Osidox, respectively, whose colors they wore was irrelevant, for where they went, the machine gods strode the universe in person. Warhorns sang different songs in different pitches for the Legios. Vox communications were disrupted by the storm and enemy action, and the melancholic calls of the machines were as much use as more sophisticated means of communication and calling units together. As the Imperators passed, the vocal salute broke up, and the Titans sang to others of their order to bring them into formation. What was I going to say? This goes with my rule about how Imperator Titans are portrayed in most 40k novels. They're meant to be big and badass, but they usually die within 5 pages of appearing. And they exist purely to show the stakes of an engagement, never to actually be badass. So, what's the over under from you guys about how long these Imperator Titans will live? First, Manipul's dropship let out a pained roar and began to lumber into the sky, its door shutting completely only when it was 100 meters overhead. The void glittered in the sandstorm. Other ships from the Artemisia were revealed by its departure. 5 more Manipuls stepped out, each one reinforced by survivors of lost formations. Coffin ships disgorged more. At 50 god engines, Legio Solaria's presence was a mighty force by the reckoning of the Crusade, but having so many there was a painful reminder to Mohana Mankata Vai of what they had lost. The machines on the field accounted for most of the Legio's depleted strength. The stressed voxcasts of landing marshals urged Mohana Mankata Vai to clear the landing zone, and she obeyed. She was walking as the last of the Legio Solaria were still putting down, leading her daughters to their muster point in a gathering of Titans like no other before. No lesser troops landed with the Titans. A burning wind rich with killing radioactivity and poison smokes whipped across the dead plains. Landmines took the place of blades of grass upon the world. The Titans detonated them by the 100 under each plunging footfall. Anything smaller would have been obliterated. The landing continued as the Titans gathered. A score of liveries struggled to show themselves through mantles of accumulating sand. Blue, gold, red, green, cream, bronze, silver, white, orange. Their heraldries were as glorious as any force of humanity's history. Communications with the Strategos aboard the Red Tier were difficult. Vox boosting cut through some of the interference and jamming, but not all. The Legios were forced to negotiate with other Legios as they walked. They did agree on an order of march surprisingly smoothly. The import of the battle was clear to them all. Now was not the time to argue. Mohana Mankata Vai sent her Venator Manipuls out to the right wing, placing them without qualm under the direction of Legio Ignis, who held that flank in force. She herself remained in the center of the army with other Myrmidon formations. They split themselves by type rather than by Legio. Axia Manipuls flanked the Myrmidons, then Venator type sent packs of warhounds to the fore, bending the battle line into a formation like the head of a charging bull. Between the outstretched horns, a skirmish line of Imperial Knights, 1,000 strong, was arrayed like footmen in front of mounted lords in a war between godly houses. Only to a Primarch's direct command would so many princeps and barons submit themselves so willingly, and then, perhaps, only to Sanguinius. By then, more ships were rising into the sky than coming into land. Most of the Titans were on the field, then they all were. The last few dropships scrambled their way back into the air. The final explosions of an unfortunate downed dropship sounded a startling cannonade for the army of giants, and they blared their war horns as one. When Mohana Mankata Vai gave the order, her voice was interwoven with those of 20 other Legio Grandmasters. "Legio Solaria," she said. "Walk." The Titans sent out towards their target, their tread shaking the earth. 20 kilometers closer to the city, they found their enemy waiting for them. 24. The Quality of Angels. Sanguinius swept over the battle within the belly of a stormbird. The port side access hatch was open, letting cold, thundering wind blast into the transit bay. The Primarch stood hunched within the doorway, his hair whipping about in the airflow as he cast his keen gaze over the battle, raging upon the plains. Hundreds of Titans engaged at close to point-blank range. The mass formation of the first days of the battle had broken up into a knotted collection of skirmishes. Lone Titans dueled around heaps of burning war machines. Packs of warhounds loped through storms of laser fire, relying on their speed to see them safe. Phalanxes of warlords stood opposite one another, exchanging fire like soldiers of early black powder cultures, doggedly holding their ground in the hope the foe would break first. Titans were never intended to fight like primitive braves. He imagined them grappling on the ground, weapons discarded, attempting to brain each other with rocks and fist. Dozens of engines had fallen, as he watched a circle of light burst upwards as a reactor went critical. It was bright enough to temporarily blind a mortal man, but Sanguinius stared unflinchingly at it as it grew and shrank back, winking out to leave a black, perfectly round scar upon the earth. More machines were dying with every hour. Ahead was the reality-defying bulk of Nircon City. The void shields had collapsed around large parts of it, and the mountainous hive was under vicious bombardment from the fleet. Huge rents had opened in the side. Fires burned unchecked over hundreds of levels. Its defense lasers were mercilessly targeted by the Imperial fleet, but its galleries housed thousands of artillery pieces that showered the plain with explosive scatterings of metal, and the bastions of its walls were replete with the armaments of fallen god engines. He watched it all with a Primarch's wisdom, asking his pilots to bank one way or another so he could better examine details. He did not approve of what he saw, but war was not a matter of best circumstances. If one could choose the moment, disposition of forces, and field of conflict, then there would be no war at all, he reminded himself. From a vox-emitter mounted in his collar, a steady stream of reports came in from his fleet and armies. The attack on the Anvil had begun. Ascalon had already penetrated the outer defenses of the docks. Amit fought upon its voidal ramparts. The fleet saw off probing attacks from traitor flotillas. Measured by the standards of the day, the battle was going well, but the standards of the day were dire. The size of Horus's armies in the Beta Garmin cluster had shocked him. If this had been a compliance, they would have retreated and reevaluated their plans. They simply did not have that option. His sons thought the situation parlous too. Raldoron stood at Sanguinius' side. There was just enough room for the equerry to see out past the gold-armored Primarch, down to the battle, and he had formed his own opinion. "This is not an optimal strategic choice," said Raldoron, seeing something of what his gene-father saw. "There are war machines dying down there that should be on Terra. We gain nothing by committing so many Titans to this battle. We shall lose more than we need to for a city of questionable strategic value." Sanguinius nodded. He'd been pensive for so long now, his sons had ceased to question his behavior. There was no talk of his mood changing back, or even of comparing the old Sanguinius to the new. Quiet, brooding, and distracted was how they had come to recognize their lord, a tendency that had begun at Cygnus and grown ever since. And although he had become more centered after the events of Davin, and more resolved, he had hardly grown more joyful. "You are correct, Vice Captain." Where Raldoron needed his helm's vox-emitter to be heard over the wind, Sanguinius did not. He was helmetless and spoke quietly, but his voice was heard by Raldoron and all the other Blood Angels within the ship. A touch of soul to soul that sound played no part in. "This is the only way. The Titan Legios bicker. We hardly have control over the situation in Beta Garmin. We lead a fragile coalition. Horus has fear and fanaticism to weld his armies together. In divisive forces, further division is the worst solution. Here, together, the Legios have purpose, and share risk equally. This strategy serves more than tactical needs, but addresses the exigencies of morale and politics." Raldoron made a dismissive noise that his golden helm amplified. Sanguinius glanced at him before returning his attention to the battlefield. "I know well your dislike for politics, but although you were made for war, you are wise enough to know that war itself is only an extension of the political, and a civil war is the most political of all kinds." Since he is in a helmet, I gotta do the helmet muffling.
Was it politics, my lord, that brought about this ruination? I thought it treachery.
It was, said Sanguinius, choosing to ignore Raldoran's challenging tone. Though the politics of gods, it was politics still. Lord Dorn was right to send the bulk of the Titan legions here. Can you imagine this carnage upon the surface of Terra? It is better that they fight and die here than extinguish each other before the palace. There would be precious little left if the whole of the Collegia Titanica were to settle its differences within sight of my father.
These engines were always overmighty. Did you not ever question the concentration of such power in the hands of the Mechanicum?
Politics, said Sanguinius sadly. You are a space marine. You are the killers of men. They are the shatterers of worlds. Each thing has its place. He paused. But you think them ill-disciplined, and that they might be more effectively employed.
Yes, my lord,
admitted Raldoran. That is so, but do not blame them. These legios are fractus only because they wish to survive. They too have their brotherhoods and their bonds. They look upon the prospect of a battle of this kind, and they see their order's annihilation. They, like we, do not care for their own lives. They are faithful, worthy, and mightier than most men of any sort. But they are still men and women, and need to be treated as such. They accept gladly their own loss, or even the loss of all their kind. But no one can easily sacrifice themselves, while others are left unscathed. Not one of them would have agreed to commit themselves fully if their peers were given other duties. This is a fight of so great a magnitude, an extinction of machines. It undermines their discipline and their sense of duty.
You say they are strong. The god engines are, but their weakness is human.
There is weakness in all the works of men, yourself and myself included, said Sanguinius, rousing a little. Neither you nor I would gladly sacrifice our own legion for another without firm cause. And if asked to lay down our lives to the last space marine, while our brothers in other legions were kept to one side, we too would deem it unfair and cruel. He looked out over the wrecked plains. That kind of thoughtlessness helped us into this hell. Would Perturabo have turned if his legion had been shown a little more consideration? Would Mortarion if his ego had been paid a touch more care? Kurtz, too, would have been capable of less harm had his madness been addressed. And it should have been, but it was not. We were made to be the lords of men. Our father trusted us too much to solve our own problems, and we fell so far short of his vision. Raldoran was shocked by his father's insights, and would have deemed them close to treasonous if they had not been uttered in so measured a way, or by so perfect a being. Sanguinius saw this as he saw Raldoran's unswerving loyalty and his love. It pained the Primarch to know that Raldoran and many of the others would have followed him into damnation if he had chosen the other path presented him. That his legion marched so faithfully towards a different sort of hell sickened Sanguinius, but there was no other way.
We followed the Emperor's lead, my lord,
said Raldoran. Look not to the Emperor and expect perfection. My father is mighty and good and wise, but he is a man. Nobody is infallible. Such false faith gave us certainty when there was none.
Then perhaps we should have discouraged our faith,
said Raldoran. He tried, said Sanguinius. He looked to the sky. The sun was a smear in the yellow against which craft warred like moths, battering against a curtained casemate deep in the night. He smiled with bitter inner knowledge. Hubris is a trap for us all. That is the last certainty when all others are gone. There are no more certainties in this galaxy, my son. Only hubris and only war.
This is a better war than most. It is one we need to fight. These armies that flock to the system, they might follow Gilliman, but he is not here. And would they obey the Lion, Russ, or the Khan, or even Dorn? I have to be here. This is my place for now. I will not say it my destiny, for I defy the concept, but it is my rightful role, and I choose it without qualm.
He stirred, remembering similar words spoken by his brother Leman Russ not so long ago. Where was the great wolf now, he wondered. Perhaps he was dead. No word had come from him or his legion since he had left to face Horus. Were they all doomed to that same mistake? Both he and Russ believed fighting the War Master to be their fate. His wings flexed. The movement was a wordless signal to the sanguinary guard, who took the ornaments looped over his wings, wrist, and handed the Primarch his golden helm in preparation for flight. While the majority of my brother's legions are here, we can press him elsewhere. The Khan's Ordu wounds his armies, bleeding him with 1,000 tulwar cuts. Horus is not here, but we can hurt him. We shall retake Neocon City and this world and so stabilize the front. The more time Horus expends in fighting us in the cluster, the more likely our ultimate victory becomes. He held out his right hand. The blade and carmine was presented to him, and he clasped its hilt. Into his left he took the glorious spear of Telesto. The battle for the anvil goes to plan, as Kelon and Amet will deliver the Star Fortress unto me. We shall take this city. He turned from the side door and marched through the transit hold. Sanguinary guards stood as he passed, their artificial wings unfolding in readiness to follow the Primarch.
Open the rear ramp,
Raldoron ordered. The side door closed. The ship tilted as the pilots adjusted to the change in airflow. Then again as the rear ramp, large enough for a tank to drive down, was pushed wide by gleaming pistons. Sanguinius walked to the very edge and stared down at the maelstrom. His wings slightly spread to help him maintain his balance. There was never a time when the Primarch did not have poise. He was perfection itself, incarnated in human form.
Time to show our hand.
He searched the ground from the open ramp, post-human vision scouring the battlefield for a place to make his appearance. Sanguinius understood almost as well as Fulgrim that there was an element of theater to war.
War is art. One must make a statement with it, or it cannot be called art at all.
A conflict caught his eye, a fight within the wider fight of surpassing majesty.
There!
He pointed his sword to where a pair of imperators faced off against one another, dozens of titans varying sorts and support, like kings attended by their knights, or the pieces upon a regicide board. Their liveries were caked in brown dust, dulling the colors, and yet, though all involved were made to the same plan, by the same science, there was no mistaking which side each titan belonged to. The way they moved was different. Traitors strutted. Those loyal to Terra moved with a machine's solidity, less fluid perhaps, but purer in motion.
That titan bears the Mark-class Imperator in honor of my father. It is a disgrace to his name. Its personal designation is Axis Mundi, as if Horus' plan for humanity will be the axis around which the universe shall spin. It will not be so. Both names are insults. It will fall to my hand.
Through the distortions of his helm's vox emitter, his vox was still beautiful.
My lord, it is not wise,
said Raldoron.
The machine will shoot you down from the sky. It is too great a threat. That is why it must die. A mark of a sign, a show of imperial strength. My traitor brothers put so much store in omens. I will give them a sign they can easily read.
At Sanguinius, that's first of all, that's pretty badass. Sanguinius, you're such a Chad, and I respect you for it. At Sanguinius' order, half a dozen other Stormbirds flew into formation with his own shrapnel. Flew into formation with his own. Shrapnel burst all around them as the city sought to down the Primarch. but not one was touched. Still in formation, they banked around and swooped down at their target. The towers upon the Imperator's back opened fire, streaking the air with las and shell, but the void shields of the gunships held, and they stood like hawks upon their prey, their engines shrieking.
"Put down with the others where you might do some good," said Sanguinius to Raldoron. "The ramparts, perhaps. I leave the decision to you, First Captain."
"You cannot, my lord,"
said Raldoron. The engines screamed louder and louder. Explosions boomed around the ship. The void shields reacted with curlicued patterns of energy and a smell of sweetness too close to rot. Sanguinius spread his legs and held aloft his sword and his spear.
"I can do as I will, Raldoron, without fear or caution. You forget my father's greatest gift to me. Through the foresight he gave me, I know I do not die here today."
With those words, he fell backwards out of the Stormburn, turned and stretched out his wings. From the ships about, dozens of gold-clad warriors leapt after their Primarch into the cauldron of war. All right, we're gonna end there for tonight because my voice is pretty shot. But yeah, I'm glad we got some Sanguinius action going on here. Just being an absolute Chad. I respect Sanguinius. the Emperor's beautiful golden hawk boy. I hope you guys had fun this little impromptu stream. And I hope you enjoyed us coming back to our read-alongs. Hopefully I'll do another one in the future. We're getting pretty close to the end of this book. I think we're in like the final 20% of it. So if you haven't done so already, please give me a follow here on Twitch. Give me a sub over on YouTube. You can give me a follow on Blue Sky. And you can join my Discord, the Eternal Citadel, and be a part of my incredible community. I want you all to know you're all beautiful, amazing, and valid people, and I hope you enjoyed spending your evening with me nearly as much as I enjoyed spending it with you. And never forget the most important part, which is that the world is better having you in it. That'll be it for today. No stream on Monday. We're still taking hiatus for the month of December, but we're hoping to get back into more Nexus Forlorn Legacy in January, as well as I am going to be running off stream a one-shot with some cute girls and a cute boy. So hopefully you will see them in future D&D content. But yeah, that'll be it for tonight. We're going to, of course, raid my good friend over at the AP Crew. Certified Good Beans having a Just Chatting stream about Santa stuff. So if you are a follower, please copy down the call to hugs. If you're a sub, please copy down the Knight's message. And let us raid AP Crew. Alright, everybody. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful night and the sweetest of dreams. Bye!